Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Random Video Thursday. And today I'm going to do, it's going to be another Beatles themed video. This time I'm going to show off my collection of Beatles books. Now for those who know me very well, you'll know that I am a huge fan of the Beatles. They're my favorite rock band of all time. And as you might guess, I have some great Beatles books. So let's get started. I have 7 Beatles books. So the first one is this book right here. This book is simply called The Beatles. And I got this book about, probably about 4 years ago. And this is actually the oldest Beatles book in my collection. This particular book was published in 1980. And as you can see, it's a picture book. And it has several photographs of the Beatles throughout the years. And of course, we got the front cover. And it also has portraits of the Beatles designed by artist Andy Warhol. So here on the front cover, Paul McCartney. On the back cover is John Lennon. When you open up the book, there's Ringo Starr, and after the last page, George Harrison, my favorite Beatle. The next Beatles book. This is another big book, as you can see. This one is fittingly called Here, There, and Everywhere. I got this for Christmas last year, and it's a big book of Beatles trivia. Trivia about every album. For instance, there's Abbey Road, my favorite Beatles album. Of course, everybody knows the cover art of that album. Very iconic. Picture of the Beatles crossing the street, and a big part of pop culture. The next book I have, The Beatles Forever, which is basically a timeline of the Beatles. It's sort of a timeline book about the Beatles. Once again, there's Abbey Road. Everybody knows this album cover. Abbey Road is actually my favorite album by the Beatles. This right here is The Beatles. All you ever wanted to know about the Fab Four. And this teaches you a lot about the Fab Four. It's basically a thorough description of the life of all 4 Beatles. This next Beatles book is The Beatles, the Ultimate Collector's Edition. I've had this book for about 6 years now. I started reading this book when I first became a fan of the Beatles. Like when I started to learn more about the Beatles, when I became a big fan of them. And this Beatles book, it actually looks more like a magazine. And it has detailed descriptions of every album. And every single album. So it starts off with Please Please Me, the band's first album, or Introducing the Beatles, as it was known in the United States, With the Beatles, which was released in the United States as Meet the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. This is the British version of the album. The American version of the album, which actually came out first, has a different cover art. Beatles for Sale, the fourth album by the Fab Four, or Beatles 65, as it was known when it was first released in the United States. There's Help. In the United States, that's the British version of the album. The American version of the album pretty much has the same cover art, except with a couple differences. Rubber Soul. Revolver. An iconic Beatles album. And yes, this book talks about every single Beatles album, so all 12 albums. Here's an iconic album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And then we have the Beatles, also known as the White Album. It was a double album. Yellow Submarine, based on the animated movie of the same name. It also has Abbey Road, my favorite Beatles album. And Let It Be, the band's 12th and final album. So yes, this is a detailed description of every Beatles album. This is actually one of the first Beatles books that I collected. And then this book, this is simply called The Beatles. And this book is interesting because it's a detailed description, not just about every Beatles album, but it's a detailed description about all the songs on every Beatles album. Including when the albums were recorded and when they were first released. And finally, my favorite Beatles book, A Hard Day's Right, obviously a pun on A Hard Day's Night. This is a great book. Not going to go into too much detail about this book because I did a review on it. If you want to check that out. But this is basically it has a detailed, thorough story behind every song that the Beatles wrote. It doesn't have any no cover songs. This is songs written by the Beatles. And it's a really good book. I've had this in my house for several years, actually, but I started reading it about 4 years ago. It's really good. And I also did a book review on this book. Anyway, that's all the Beatles books I have. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for tuning in to another great video about the Fab Four, my favorite band. And that was my Beatles book collection. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.